So there's been a lot said about the going away of third-party cookies, and it feels like everybody has their head wrapped around that fact. But most people don't really understand what comes next. And in fact, there's a lot of anxiety right now because I don't think most people really have thought through what is coming next and what does this shift mean. My favorite metaphor so far has been to explain that we're kind of doing a reverse Indiana Jones. You remember in Raiders of the Lost Ark when he took the gold and he replaced it with sand? We're kind of doing the opposite, which is we're taking sand and we're replacing it with gold. And in this case, what I mean by that metaphor is that the internet has been based on an opt-out system, using cookies that were never built to really be this mechanism for creating targeted advertising. But as an industry, we adapted. We figured out a way to provide addressable advertising to everybody using third-party cookies. But what's happening is the internet is quickly moving, partly because of regulation, well-intended regulation, by the way, to move from that opt-out internet to an opt-in internet. So an opt-out internet is one where you have to do a bunch of clicking and navigating to take cookies off of your computer. And the default is that it's on, that you didn't even have to choose to get targeted advertising and you get it. That's what the world of cookies enabled, and that was not what's best for the consumer. What an opt-in internet is you're not allowed to provide any targeting or leverage my data until I consent to it. And so you're seeing this especially on sites in Europe where you go to them and say, hey, there are cookies on this page, enable those cookies, and they're giving you a series of choices. Sometimes those choices are complicated, but we are getting better at explaining that this is an opt-in internet. No data will be used until you opt into it. So this is an upgrade across the board. But now what does that mean for the future? What it means is that we've all waited to properly explain that quid pro quo of the internet until now. And the time has come. That has to happen. We are going to explain that in order to see this content, you have to see relevant ads. That's the only way that the publisher can afford to stay in business. And if we just take relevant ads and turn them into irrelevant ads, then you turn $10 CPMs into $5 CPMs. If you reduce CPMs dramatically, then you will reduce the number of publishers and websites and apps and CTV companies from the landscape. And nobody wants to see that happen. What some publishers are doing, they're ahead of it. They're getting ahead of it. We're seeing lots of them adopt things like Unified ID or at least interoperability with Unified ID, and that's going fantastically well. This will create a much better ecosystem for targeted advertising. It will also create a much better system for opt-outs. It'll make it possible to solve the problems like, hey, I don't want to see this ad anymore because I already bought it. It happens to all of us. All of those problems can be solved with the new infrastructure that's being created, which has better opt-outs, better explanations. But it really is dependent at this point on publishers implementing with the recognition that third-party cookies are going away in less than a year.